I built the perfect life for my family, 2 jobs, a nanny, a stay-at-home wife, but she says I ruined her life. Now I'm done. I'm a 43-year-old man doing my best to take care of my wife, who's 38, our 2 kids, ages 3 and 5, and even my mother-in-law. I'd like to think I'm doing a pretty decent job. Over the years, I've worked hard to improve our family's situation. Not only did I earn a second bachelor's degree and, more recently, a master's in a STEM field, but I also managed to juggle 2 full-time jobs while completing my second degree and putting my wife through school. She earned a degree in a healthcare field that offers stable, well-paying jobs in the $60,000 to $70,000 per year range. However, after we had our 2 kids, she decided to put her career on hold and focus on being a stay-at-home mom. At first, it was tough, especially while I was finishing my master's. But once I completed it and our youngest turned 3, my career took off, and we reached a point where we could sustain ourselves on my single income. We're not rolling in money, but for a one-income family of 4, we do all right. My base salary is a little north of $150,000, plus bonuses. This past year has been overwhelming for my wife, so despite the fact that I now work 75% remotely, I factored a daytime nanny into our budget to help her around the house and take care of one child while the other is in school. My day kicks off at about 5:36 a.m. I get the house in order before the nanny arrives at 8 a.m., wake our oldest, get them ready for school, make breakfast, plan my workday, drop them off, and make it back home in time to let the nanny in. My current project at work has me completely grounded for the next 2 months, meaning I'm working 100% from home. While that's convenient, my role involves managing teams worldwide, so I spend my days buried in meetings and overseeing industry projects. For the last month and a half, I've noticed something. My wife, despite saying how stressful her life is, doesn't start her day until around 10 a.m. After about a week of working from home, I asked my mother-in-law and the nanny if this was normal, and they both confirmed that it was sometimes a little earlier, sometimes later. She mostly wakes up, makes food, then spends time scrolling through her phone or shopping online. Now, here's where my frustration comes in. I'm genuinely happy that I can provide her with a comfortable life, especially since we both grew up without much. I understand that postpartum depression, the stress of raising kids, feeling unfulfilled, and even my own shortcomings as a husband could play a role in all this. But at the end of the day, everything in our household is taken care of and then some. I handle all the finances because she said she was too busy to do it. I pay all the household bills, my personal expenses, her bills, and I also track and take care of all the maintenance for our home, cars, and pets. On top of that, I help cover my mother-in-law's medical bills and car payments. And yet, despite all of this, my wife seems to think my life is a cakewalk compared to hers. I can't open up to her about my stress because every time I do, it turns into a competition. If I've had a rough day, she insists hers was worse because I was lucky enough to get away for work. If my feet hurt from walking all day while traveling for work, she'll say that's nothing compared to her standing in the kitchen with a toddler hanging onto her. For the past 2 years or so, I've been told that I've ruined her life and her opportunities, yet whenever I remind her of those statements, she denies ever saying them and avoids taking responsibility. Even my mother-in-law has pulled me aside and mentioned that she's noticed a change in both of us. I've grown much closer to my kids, and honestly, I find myself hugging the dogs and talking to them more than I do my own wife. It feels like I'm in emotional survival mode. I'm one step away from climbing higher in my career, and at the same time, one step away from drowning my frustrations in a bottle of whiskey. I'm sure some guys out there will call me weak or say I'm simping, but the truth is, I'm not a machine. I just want to feel like someone outside of my kids sees and appreciates everything I do. I know stay-at-home moms might have their opinions, and that's fine. I was raised by a single mother, so I understand how difficult it is. But let's be real, with the help of her mom and a nanny 5 days a week to care for one toddler while the other is at school, is she really experiencing the typical struggles of a stay-at-home mom? My friends and colleagues who are single parents don't think so. Some might say this sounds like some poorly written fiction, but it's my reality. And just to clarify a few things. 1. I have never cheated. Yes, I work in an industry with a high percentage of women, but I'm an open book. My wife has access to my work calendar, emails, and everything else if she ever wanted to check. Ironically, she still doesn't fully understand what I do for a living. 2. Both our families have encouraged her to go to therapy, but she refuses or finds ways to avoid it. 3. Although I was raised primarily by my mother, my biological father was present in my life. My wife, on the other hand, grew up with both parents in what appears to be a stable, monogamous marriage spanning over 40 years. I have tried countless times to talk to her about my feelings and everything going on, but every conversation turns into a game of one-upmanship. 5. Someone asked what I'm getting out of this marriage, and honestly, I don't know anymore. Now, aside from my two wonderful kids, I've found myself asking the same question. Our sex life has practically vanished over the past year. I figured maybe it was tied to depression or something else she was going through. Maybe I'm just not attractive to her anymore or not good in bed because of my health issues. I'm no supermodel, but temptation and opportunity have presented themselves, and I've never given in. As cliché as it sounds, I truly love my wife and want to be with only her. I have to give her credit where it's due because I don't want to sound completely one-sided. When she cooks, she prepares meals for everyone in the house, me, the kids, my mother-in-law, and even the nanny. Besides breakfast, she takes care of all meals and snacks. I usually fast until lunchtime, and our oldest eats something small just in case they don't like what school serves. She does all the laundry for both kids and herself, though she rarely folds and puts it away. I handle my own laundry, and the rest of my clothes go to the dry cleaners since they're work-related. She keeps track of our pantry and fridge, but after making the shopping list, I'm the one who goes out and buys everything or arranges deliveries. She takes care of the house and bathrooms about half the time, with the rest of the cleaning done by me, my mother-in-law, or sometimes the nanny when she wants to go above and beyond. Before we hired the nanny, my mother-in-law was my wife's main support system until her unexpected medical issues. That's when I decided to bring in a nanny to help both of them, especially when my mother-in-law was undergoing treatments and needed time to recover. Update 1 to May 6, 2024. Not sure if anyone is still reading, but I appreciate those who reached out and chatted with me. Since I've kept my newfound friends updated, I figured I'd add a post here as well. I showed my wife this post the following weekend, and she read everything, including the comments. Long story short, argument ensued, she left to stay with her sister, and I've been a single parent since. Aside from telling the kids goodnight, our routine hasn't changed much. There's not much else to say except thank you for the kind words of encouragement. Also, a special shout out to those who jokingly offered to let me ruin their life with my venting. Those messages were a much needed highlight as I sat here drinking with my dog while the rest of the house was asleep. It's a depressing thought that I've had to turn to strangers online for some kind of validation, but here we are. I apologize if I'm being too vague, but to put it simply, I've ruined my wife's life again. June 3, 2024. I just wanted to give an update to those who've been kind enough to check in via messages and comments. Apologies in advance for the long post. It's ironic that I'm writing this follow-up during Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, but I really need another outlet outside of my therapist. This isn't some dramatic, storybook ending or the downfall of a relationship that some might have been expecting. If you want the short version, wife left, came back like nothing happened, made it about her, and nothing has changed. I'm still struggling mentally, knowing that things will likely stay the same while trying to hold it together for our kids. Lots of takeout lately. The day after she packed up and left, my wife tried to come back and take the kids to her sister's. Naturally, I was against it, and so was her entire family, including her sister. It wasn't fair to uproot our kids and throw them into a house that wasn't theirs, especially considering the financial and housing strain it would put on her family. She doesn't work, and her sister's household is already full. Her husband and 3 kids all live with their dad in the house they grew up in. After a little over a week, she must have cooled off because she came back like she had just returned from a casual shopping trip. She walked into my office while I was in a conference call and just stood there, glaring at me. I couldn't just jump off the call since this is a critical time of the quarter for my team. I guess that didn't sit well with her because once I wrapped up my meeting, she immediately started yelling about how much I don't care about her or her well-being. I didn't have the energy to argue, I just shook my head. My mother-in-law, who had heard the commotion, came in and pulled her away, telling her to leave me alone while the nanny kept our youngest occupied on the other side of the house. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat alone in my office with a drink, something that has become a habit lately. My wife came in. We talked. We argued. We cried. We drank. One thing led to another, and we ended up in bed. I wish I could say that was our moment of reconciliation, but the next morning, as the reality of everything settled in, she immediately started talking about how hard the past week had been for her. Not the kids. Not me. Just her. She went on about how difficult it was staying at her dad's house, in her old room, with her sister's family. How lucky I am to still be in my own home, able to do what I do. How my life, and everyone else's in our family, is so much easier compared to hers even though we had similar upbringings. Something inside me broke that morning. My heart. My mind. I've been spiraling ever since. This past week, I tried once again to sit down and have an open, honest conversation with her. I wanted to talk about my stress, my anxiety, and how I've been feeling overall. But instead of listening, she turned it into another shouting match. Do you even know how hard this is for me? You're supposed to help me be happy. Me, so when it comes to my happiness, my stress, my needs, none of that matters? We all have our own problems. You need to figure it out and get over them. And that was that. I don't know who the woman I share a home with anymore. This isn't the woman I married, the one I vowed to spend my life with and raise our kids alongside. Since that conversation, I've pulled back emotionally. I've been sleeping in my office, on the couch, or in my kids' beds after putting them to sleep. But no amount of distance changes anything. She still starts her day at 10 a.m., scrolling through her phone, chatting in her mom groups, while the kids are in my mother-in-law's or the nanny's care. Nothing has changed, and honestly, I doubt it ever will. The sad reality is that even if we got divorced, I don't think it would feel much different. When she left, the only real difference was that we ordered takeout a little more often. My biggest fear isn't losing my wife, it's losing my kids in the process. So, like many men, and some women, I've talked to, I guess I'll just keep smiling through the pain and suffering in silence. First off, thank you to everyone who commented or sent me messages. I know my last post was emotionally charged, I wrote it fresh off another argument, but I want to clarify a few things. After our kids were born, their pediatrician's office had my wife complete postpartum depression screenings. Both times, she scored high enough to warrant seeing a therapist. After our second child, her score was even higher, and I made every effort to get her help. She refused. That's when my mother-in-law and the nanny stepped in for support. I know people might judge me for staying, for not walking away, but this is part of why I haven't been able to just file the paperwork and end things. I also understand that staying in this silent suffering isn't good for me, for my kids, or for the long-term health of our home. But neither is a bitter, hate-filled divorce. Some have told me it's like ripping off a bandage, that it'll hurt at first but then the pain will fade. But I can't stand the thought of my kids growing up believing their parents split because of them or that we ended up hating each other. For those I've spoken to privately since my last post, I've shared a bit more about my life. Before my promotion, I was a project manager handling teams and budgets, so planning for every possibility is second nature to me. That being said, I've already made contingency plans in case this all goes south. I've consulted with 3 different lawyers, I know our rights, and I have a draft settlement ready to go. If it comes down to it, I know what I want, and I'm prepared to offer more than what's fair to ensure my kids' well-being. But I also have a plan in place if this ends up in court. At the end of the day, my suffering in silence is entirely on me. I know that. I'm stubborn. I'm not ready to give up. I endure this to maintain the stability my kids know, to make sure my mother-in-law's medical treatments continue uninterrupted, and to hold on to the hope that one day my wife will finally agree to therapy, that we might somehow climb out of this together. But here we are. July 1st, 2024, I'm done. Father's Day dinner. In front of the therapist. In front of our family. My wife looked me in the eye and said I don't do anything. That I am nothing. She got served. She's mad. She's trying to act perfect now. Meanwhile, I'm just waiting. I'm taking care of my family, our kids, my mom, my mother-in-law. Oh well. If I've already ruined my wife's life, might as well ruin everyone else's too, right? For the record, to clear up some confusion, no, I didn't get 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's all at the same time while working 2 jobs. I finished my first degree in the early 2000s. Years later, while working 2 full-time jobs, one in a hospital on a 36/48 schedule, the other at a big box store pulling 32 to 40 hours a week, I took 2 online classes per semester to earn my second bachelor's. That was how I paid for both my own and my wife's tuition. She decided to go back to school before we had kids. Once I finished my second degree and entered my current industry, I was finally able to work a single job while earning my master's. I only bring this up because I'm surprised I even have to spell it out. Working 2 jobs while going to school isn't that uncommon, or at least, I didn't think it was. My wife chooses not to work. Technically, she has a job, but she works so rarely we forget it exists. In the past 5 months, she's worked a single 8-hour shift on a random Tuesday. Her manager is incredibly supportive. She has a flexible PRN model where she gets a list of available shifts and can pick up work whenever she wants. Despite that, she barely works, yet still tells our family that her career is on hold. The reality? She has every opportunity to work more if she wanted to. She has support, our family, her job, and myself included, yet she still makes excuses. We hired a nanny. My mother-in-law moved in to help. I work from home. Her job allows her full control over her schedule. But here we are. As for me, I've been in therapy for a while now. Between home and work, my mental and physical health have taken a beating. And since I can't find support where I need it most, at home with my wife, I made the choice to seek professional help rather than finding comfort in someone else or at the bottom of a bottle. I've tried to talk to her about it, tried to explain what I'm going through, but like I've mentioned before, she always has to one-up me. So here we are. My in-laws are still married. My mother-in-law moved in to help my wife. My sister-in-law and her family moved back into their parents' house for their own reasons. And me? I'm still here. Sil and her family are staying with us to save money and get back on their feet. In return, my wife and I benefit from Mill's help, and it allows us to keep a closer eye on her while she undergoes her bi-monthly treatments. As for my wife, all signs point to postpartum depression, at least based on the questionnaire she's completed. On top of that, there's a history of symptomatic OCD, ADHD, and other issues that she's either refused to get evaluated for or outright dismissed when given a diagnosis. I knew what I was getting into. I loved her, flaws and all, just as she once accepted mine. So spare me the "I don't feel sorry for you" or your simping comments. I'm just a man who fell in love and wanted to give my person the best of me and the best life I could offer. But here we are. There's no shortage of red pill guys out there quick to call me weak, saying I should have left long ago. I respect everyone's opinions, but let me make one thing clear: if this situation affected only me, I would have walked away a long time ago. But it's not just me. One comment from a Redditor has stuck with me: I'm the kind of man who would take a bullet for his kids. Maybe not in the literal sense, but in every other way that matters. Protecting them, physically and emotionally, is my priority. And if that means enduring pain and frustration so they don't have to, then so be it. I'd like to believe other fathers out there would do the same. That's why I've endured as much as I have. For now, I'd rather my wife use me as an emotional outlet for whatever she's struggling with rather than directing it toward our kids. To those who have reached out, commented, and even become my unexpected pen pals, I appreciate you. I never imagined my story would spread across different subreddits, other platforms, and even YouTube. Love me, hate me, or call it fake, regardless of where you stand. Thank you for the constructive comments and the messages checking in. My kids and I? We're going to be alright moving forward. Now for the update: the end of an era. This will be shorter than some might expect, because honestly, there's not much left to say. This is more for closure, to answer lingering questions, and to give some folks their well-earned "I told you so" moment. After a hard push from our family through an intervention, my wife and I finally attempted marriage counseling. I'm sure you can guess how that went. Blame, tears, regret, gaslighting. A familiar script, only this time performed in front of a licensed therapist instead of Reddit or mom groups. The therapist's insights and suggestions? Completely ignored, too inconvenient, too much of a challenge to her status quo. One moment stuck with me, though. The therapist asked my wife when she last truly felt happy. Her answer? 12 years ago. 12 years ago, she was still in her 20s. No kids. Living with her ex. A vastly different stage of life. Maybe it's petty, but if that's the last time she was truly happy, then it wouldn't be a stretch to think she could find that happiness again, especially since her ex is still in the same apartment, working the same job, living the same lifestyle he did back then. And hey, no judgment. But I'm in my 40s. I have kids. The idea of going clubbing 3 or 4 nights a week is laughable to me. And I sure as hell don't want my kids growing up in a household where their mother and her friends drown themselves in White Claws. For those wondering, no, she hasn't physically cheated on me. That, I can confirm. Emotionally? That's harder to say. I checked phone records and saw nothing out of the ordinary, but I didn't bother with social media apps like Instagram or Snapchat. At this point, does it even matter? Then came Father's Day. It was supposed to be a simple family barbecue, nothing extravagant, just good food and time spent together. My wife, as usual, treated it like any other day. Sleep in, get up, cook, phone, shop, brief attempt at playing with the kids. Back to the phone. During dinner, I was talking with my brother-in-law about our kids' Father's Day activities at school. I mentioned how it was a little sad seeing some kids sitting alone during the breakfast with dad event I attended. My wife, loud enough for the entire room to hear, blurted out with a laugh, "It's not like you do anything anyway." I could have gone instead. Silence. I sat there, stunned, processing what she had just said while the dining room fell into an awkward hush. Then, my mother-in-law broke the tension. "Well," she said, "maybe if you feel that way, one of you should divorce the other." My wife, clearly taken aback, looked at her mother in confusion before laughing mockingly and pointing at me. As if another woman would want a man like him? Just look at you. The room remained silent. I felt a mixture of anger, heartbreak, embarrassment, and something else, clarity. In typical manly man fashion, I simply nodded, stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out. I ignored the cries from my family and my kids begging me to stay. I don't know what happened in that house the rest of the evening. I couldn't bring myself to check the cameras. All I know is that when I came home early Monday morning, something had shifted. At 6 a.m., like always, I got up, got the house in order, and got our oldest ready for school. I checked emails. I checked messages. Nothing seemed different. As I got dressed to leave, I glanced over at my wife. She was snoring lightly, curled up in our bed. I just stood there for a moment, looking at her, thinking about what we had, what we lost. And I knew. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. That morning, I texted my lawyer and told him to move forward with serving her. Fast forward to last week, she was served at our home. Since I work from home, I had no choice but to be there when it happened. She had what I can only describe as a meltdown, storming into my office, screaming, "How could you do this to me?" My mother-in-law stepped in, trying to defuse the situation, but my wife twisted it into me turning her whole family against her. Honestly, I might have felt bad if her outburst wasn't immediately followed by her suddenly acting like the devoted wife and mother she hasn't been in years. I know some people might say she's making an effort. But I've seen this before, temporary bursts of effort, only for everything to slip back into the same cycle. I'm not falling for it again. For those wondering, I'm aiming for full or at least majority custody of our kids. No matter what happens, I will continue to cover all of their expenses, insurance, tuition. Both are enrolled in private school for the fall, medical bills, and anything else they need. My mother-in-law has been a pillar of strength for me throughout this, alongside my own mother. She's shown me the kind of unwavering love and support that I once hoped my wife would give to our kids and me. Out of respect for her, and because I know firsthand the financial and emotional toll cancer takes on a family, I will continue to help with her treatments as needed. Some might say I should cut off my wife's entire family, but I won't. I've been both a family member and a care provider on both sides of a cancer diagnosis, and I know what that battle takes. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. That said, I'm prepared to go to war if I have to, but all I really want is a clean, no-fuss divorce. My wife won't be getting alimony, no matter what her Reddit sympathizers or the Facebook mom groups think. 1. We live in a state that doesn't typically enforce alimony. 2. She has a job waiting for her if she chooses to take it. 3. To avoid unnecessary conflict, I'll continue covering her insurance and bills until the divorce is finalized or she secures full employment. And that's it. I'm done. Now, I just wait for the process to unfold. I know some people were expecting a dramatic twist or a more satisfying conclusion, but this is real life, there's no Hollywood ending. It'll probably take a few months for everything to be finalized, depending on whether she wants to fight or not. I may or may not post an update when it's all over. For now, I'm just moving forward.